50 hotels. Now we are just not a mid-scale company. We are also providing services into the luxury space as well. We'll be announcing our first word hotels in the country very soon. Thank you.
Please give him a big hand.
Thank you, Vikram. I'm going to stay away from Chalet for a moment and just speak of partnership on the whole. And I think that partnership personally comes from many elements that have to come together more beyond a relationship which is built by an agreement. Very often hotels go into an agreement and you go by the paper and say this is what is the framework of your day-to-day work. I think partnership, and Prabhat touched on it in terms of loyalty and trust, is built over time, and that time brings the essence of the relationship forward for it to become something that becomes meaningful and then drives meaningful value to your organization. It can be for any organization. I think the relationship that partnership brings on the table, which is mutual, there needs to be a little bit of adjustment or give and take from both sides. And that's when the true magic starts to happen. If you believe that it's going to be written in stone and this is the agreement that we signed on a particular day and then can live it for the next 30 years, I think those days may not last you too long.
Are we as hoteliers, for example, just trying to aid the airlines when they try to do code sharing and a lot of what we believe is partnerships are very different. Airlines doing it for many years, for boat sharing. And I don't even know whether they all even know one another. They do a lot of boat sharing. How is hotels different actually?
Okay. Boat sharing, airlines, hotels, I think I'm not speaking about Accor into Globe over here at all because we've been told not to. But I think we discovered
we have an example for Accor.
There you go. So I think it's something that we really have to learn from and understand, and how we are able to kind of go beyond the obvious geographical or distribution channels that we have. The fact that there's power in collaboration leads to acceleration. What you just mentioned as a first point. So before we actually go there, I think it's governance and understanding who does what in a partnership. If that foundation sits well, then we can really build on it beautifully as we move forward. And now speaking about Accor and Interglobe, our partnership for so many years, the idea initially also was if there's an airport, there has to be a hotel there too. And that's where the collaboration came through. Now for us today, as we expand and India is so untapped that we all know about it, and right now we are literally looking at grappling for it. We have to start thinking beyond the basic obvious of how we are able to expand ourselves, get our reach, etc. But along with that, also understanding that the basis of everything remains in operational excellence. If you're able to deliver that promise and your partner is able to come to it with you, I think that's where the story for the future lies for all of us in this room.
Is there something that we learned from the airline industry, or we are trying to evolve it ourselves?
No, absolutely. We're learning from the airline industry as well, because if you see globally, as for decades together, this has been on. But today, as you see in India and internationally as well, there are these collaborations which are coming through in pure distribution channels where I'm able to help someone else also grow along with me as a win-win, and there's a recall on both the names. So that's what we compete for.
So I think firstly, thank you for having me on the panel. And I would say that when you look at partnerships in general, the whole idea is that both parties should benefit from it, and it should bring mutual incremental value to both of them, right? Of course, as hoteliers, we've all been into years of looking at management contracts, franchises, etc., and that's probably the partnerships we've been looking at. Over the last few years, it's nice to see that there are newer models of partnerships being explored. I think I can see some panelists here who have gone through that in the last couple of years, and that's good. Probably what's going to be more interesting for the industry is because eventually it's about how do you get access to the customer, right? And distribution system is one, but eventually it's also the database, right? So how do you get access to the data? And data is oil, as many people say. But our are those partnerships going to be beneficial to both is going to be the biggest question. So if uh, the partnership is such that one partner is trying to dominate the relationship, then it might not be sustainable in the long term. And that's something which all of us will also have to be conscious of.
Having said that, Samir, I think the next core theme is about the alignment of all stakeholders, including the in any partnership. In fact, a lot of partnerships look perfect on paper. In fact, a lot of partnerships look perfect on paper. It's about alignment of various stakeholders, including the owners, developers, investors. Give me some examples if some of you know as to what actually enabled a slowdown in execution because of a misalignment of these stakeholders.
It's not about the negativity of misalignment. I think this is a journey, and as many of my colleagues are mentioning, partnership is not about just the distribution partner or the airline partner. It's partnering, as I said initially, India. It's partnering along with the community that you are working for. There is lot many things at play, and it's beyond the distribution and discovery. It's about doing things which are kosher, which can be explained, and as Gaurav was mentioning about the journey can also be on transparency, and there will be a push and pull that will come along the way. I would use the word kabhi khushi kabhi gum, but hum saath saath rehte hain. And that's the way it should be, because it will never be a one straight line. But the job that is like getting very easily blurred or getting aligned together, as an example, Chalet and Indian Hotel Company are working together for a hotel. And that's a partnership that's of a very different nature. We talk about partnership with the Indian government, whether we are opening hotels in Andaman or Lakshadweep or Daman, Diu, that's exploring and pioneering of a different kind. We're partnering with the government and other states mechanism for skill development. We have 61 skill center. We have a promise to train 1 lakh people by 2030. But so you can take partnership into many different forms. And that's how I would rather open it up to a partnership of multi-kind.
You asked about a challenge or something that you witnessed, and we're very lucky today to have such a diverse portfolio, including many owners and investors sitting here. When we're designing a hotel, very often there's one vision from the ownership and the investor, there's something from the operator, and then ultimately who's going to execute this, right? If we don't look at designing and implementing and making efficient hotels with the end in mind, very often this partnership later on starts showing cracks. For example, I would make a beautiful ballroom, but if I don't have enough to serve the space later, then afterthought starts coming in, let's break this door to get a car in. Things like this, in case it's clearly defined, expectations are set, and then we stick by those to the largest part of the deal, things usually work better. A practical example.
I think this is a fine balancing act between all the stakeholders, I would say that. And it starts with clarity. Clarity amongst all stakeholders, what is the main objective is, and who is obliged to do what, and clarity in roles, responsibilities, that's more important. And second is the transparency, which I see that is more important. The sharing the common information to all the stakeholders, timely information, so that decision making is good. And when it's a partnership, it's not a hierarchy, it's a partnership when each partner, each stakeholder is owning an objective. That's a common objective for which each one of us is working towards. So when everybody is clear about the roles, responsibility, it's a momentum, and the execution becomes very easy and with the speed. That's what I would say.
Anybody else would like to add on? Right, I just come to the next point, and I have a couple of little tricky questions coming up. I'm just flipping the lid a little more towards the trade-offs. The trade-offs of such kind of sometimes partnerships that could possibly be a drag effect. Do we know of any examples where actually it has been a we all understand the benefits of it, right? And it works very well. But there are cases also where it does not work. So what I want the audience to understand from us is what also that entails a bad partnership, right? And what not to do also when you're entering into a partnership. Is it sometimes about optics or is it about outcomes? So what are the pitfalls?
I think a partnership of optics is headed for failure. I believe it needs to be of outcomes. It surely needs to be where both partners are benefiting, and I think the panelists have already touched on that. To me, a partnership is one where you are equals in your day to day, and if in that sense you're achieving this goal that is set out by both partners, if there are more than two, all three or four or five, and in the case of when you partner a country, there could be many. And if you're able to do justice to the community and the society on the whole, then that partnership is bound to fast track itself. But if you look at it as purely optics, then there is obviously a reason that somebody is looking at it as optics, and that reason will tend to take you towards a negative side of the partnership.
Vikram, if I
It's more about outcomes and less about optics. Okay.
Yeah, I use that word. The optics can open doors. It's the outcome that decides whether the door is still open or not. So it's a journey. As we've also had multiple examples. If I may just give one example, with Ambuja and Neotia that we are working on. It started with few hotels in Calcutta. Today we have, and it was a journey that we started knowing each other.
Nurtured over a period of time.
And in a quick time, we've accelerated to almost 25 hotels. We've also signed up next 15 hotels with them. But mindful of the fact that it's not about just the relationship between two groups, and as you said, respect for each other for what we do. We've opened up northeastern states for India in a big manner. And that's how partnership also gives you dimensions which otherwise would have been missed out.
So a more multi-dimensional approach to growth rather than a unidimensional, because what we were used to about 20, 30, 40 years ago in this industry, we were always many of us were in half because was about, okay, you have to handle everything with your balance sheet, you have to go ahead with what you have to do, don't dilute your brand. But today it's actually more about partnerships and it's more about complementing one another rather than it being contrary to one another. Is that right?
And yes, it is. And actually, I would say the biggest pitfall in a partnership going wrong is typically when expectations are not aligned, right? So it's important to have that conversation early on. Prabhat mentioned this very aptly, that they probably had these discussions with this partner, built the relationship over a time, and there was expectations which were aligned. And we see that all the time, right? It could be, for example, not just with operator-owner relationship. It could also be with hotels and OTAs as an example. I mean, people crib about OTAs not giving the right value, but then you need them. So it's about how do you align expectations and keep that balance. And that's not just in one area, it's across all areas of how we operate.
When we talk about transferability of guests from in a partnership, are we outsourcing too much to one another?
Well, you outsource when you don't have access to that guest directly, right? So that is one way to look at it. The other way is how much of the data do you own yourself, right? And how much flexibility do you have in accessing and using that data? So sometimes in a relationship, when one partner is very rigid on how he holds on to data, it can become difficult for the other. So that is where you can have
I think what you mentioned was
being outsourced.
That's where the balancing needs to be and in place. And what Prabhat mentioned is setting expectations right from the beginning. Right? Sorry, Atul, you had something to say?
Yeah, in this, I would say that in case of a partnership, for the customer acquisition, definitely we look at the integration with the ecosystem, the IT technology firms and all that. It's just purely from the purpose of acquisition of the customer. But when it comes to the guest experience and the customization, we wanted to hold it in our hands. Because for us, it's an integration, acquisition for speed in the business. And second, we want to provide the customer experience, which brings that, customer experience is something which is most important for us. Because if the customers are happy, our stakeholders, our investors, and developers are happy. So that's what is more important we look at in a partnership. And a partnership, we say this is bad. Yes, when the objectives are not defined, paths are not defined, timelines are not defined, and we are working on a different model, different objective, whereas we are entering into a partnership, it's a bad partnership. We try to avoid that.
Today, everyone's in a mad rush to get into partnerships. So, do you agree with that? What you're saying? Everyone's in a mad rush. Everyone wants to come out and say, "I've got a new partner today."
Yes, if it is a logo on the board, then yes, everybody is. It's just
Which
a
is
logo on
again
the
coming
board.
when the optics are outcome.
Sorry?
Again, coming back to that, is it optics or outcome?
Yes, it is not. So, second thing, partnership, everybody's in a speed to sign more properties, everybody's in a scale. But I think it's the substance and the quality also matters. Where everybody wants to catch up the speed, wants to have more properties, but at the end of the day, it's the quality which also matters. I think it's an integration, is a marriage between proper balance. I would say the word that I'm using.
I think to some extent, you might talk about it being everybody in a rush because you're looking at only one dimension, which is, typically what we all talk about in terms of signings or growth. Because a lot of us now talk about asset.
40 years ago in this industry, we were always many of us were in half because it was about, okay, you have to handle everything with your balance sheet. You have to go ahead with what you have to do. Don't dilute your brand. But today it's actually more about partnerships and it's more about complementing one another rather than it being contrary to one another. Is that right?
And yes, it is. And actually, I would say the biggest pitfall in a partnership going wrong is typically when expectations are not aligned, right? So it's important to have that conversation early on. Prabhat mentioned this very aptly that they probably had these discussions with this partner, built the relationship over a time, and there was expectations which were aligned. And we see that all the time, right? It could be, for example, not just with operator-owner relationship. It could also be with hotels and OTAs as an example. I mean, people crib about OTAs not giving the right value, but then you need them. So it's about how do you align expectations and keep that balance. And that's not just in one area, but it's across all areas of how we operate.
When we talk about transferability of guests from in a partnership, are we outsourcing too much to one another?
Well, you outsource when you don't have access to that guest directly, right? So that is one way to look at it. The other way is how much of the data do you own yourself, right? And how much flexibility do you have in accessing and using that data? So sometimes in a relationship, when one partner is very rigid on how he holds on to data, it can become difficult for the other. So that is where you can
I
have
think
this
what you
challenge
mentioned was
being outsourced.
that's where the balancing needs to be and in place. And what Prabhat mentioned is setting expectations right from the beginning. Right? Sorry, Atul, you had something to say?
Yeah, in this, I would say that in case of a partnership, for the customer acquisition, definitely we look at the integration with the ecosystem, the IT technology firms and all that. It's just purely from the person, from the purpose of acquisition of the customer. But when it comes to the guest experience and the customization, we wanted to hold it in our hands. Because for us, it's an integration, acquisition for speed in the business. And second, we want to provide the customer experience, which brings that, customer experience is something which is most important for us. Because if the customers are happy, our stakeholders, our investors, and developers are happy. So that's what is more important we look at in a partnership. And a partnership, we say this is bad. Yes, when the objectives are not defined, paths are not defined, timelines are not defined, and we are working on a different model, different objective, whereas we are entering into a partnership, it's a bad partnership. We try to avoid that.
Today, everyone's in a mad rush to get into partnerships. So, do you agree with that? What you're saying? Everyone's in a mad rush. Everyone wants to come out and say, "I've got a new partner today."
Yes, if it is a logo on the board, then yes, everybody is. It's just
Which
a logo on
is
the
again coming
board.
when the optics are outcome.
Sorry?
Again, coming back to that, is it optics or outcome?
Yes, it is not. So, second thing, partnership, everybody's in a speed to sign more properties, everybody's in a scale. But I think it's the substance and the quality also matters. where everybody wants to catch up the speed, wants to have more properties, but at the end of the day, it's the quality which also matters. I think it's integration, is a marriage between proper balance. I would say the word that I'm using.
I think to some extent, you might talk about it being everybody in a rush because you're looking at only one dimension, which is, typically what we all talk about in terms of signings or growth. Because a lot of us now talk about asset light, right? Maybe the other part is to say that are you doing it with the right level of quality in mind? Because as long as you're keeping the focus on quality, and as you mentioned that I talk about soul, as long as you retain the soul, speed could be more or less. Eventually, it's on how you want to drive it. But are you retaining the soul of your brand? And that's an important part to look at.
Speaking of speed, and I'm going to go back to Chalet in this case. We've been in the hotel space for a number of years, and our first partners were with Marriott Hotels as managed hotels. The first few years we only worked with them. Today we work with multiple brands, Accor, Taj to come as Prabhat spoke, Hyatt as well, and we've gone into that over time. But it's been built with time and trust. It's been built with decisions which are taken on where do you position your hotel, what is the kind of hotel that you're building, where is the location of that, what's the competition landscape, and then you take a decision which is best in your interest. So it's not always about speed. It's not always about accelerating and saying we want to be everywhere and doing everything. It's about choosing the right, and for each person it's different. Somebody may find scale to be more interesting, and somebody may find the right opportunity at the right space to be more valuable.
As you rightly said, it's about being timeless rather than timely. And then in doing so, India being so heterogeneous, you need to also be mindful of the brand. And apart from the location, what is the core of your particular brand that you are wanting to expand in which market? And are you conscious of the fact that it will deliver to that promise? And sometimes it's also the value that you have to see in a partnership to say no in the beginning itself.
Or not get into it if we believe that it's not going to work. Yeah?
So sometimes you do something for optics, but optics also comes with some amount of commitment, and one has to understand that the minute you're putting your name against or with someone, everyone's looking at both together. That's the first part. Secondly, yes, we want to develop, we want to make more hotels, rooms, businesses, but who's going to fill these rooms is our guess, right? That comes the second part. Now, that's where the acceleration is also coming through on today as an industry and everywhere else. Others look at us as a place where thousands of people come and go. We look at other industries and how we can utilize their products and their services to make ourselves grow and be more visible. Today, you look at credit card affiliations, and I think everyone's doing this. It's a massive way of putting it up. Your name is actually pitched in saying that if you carry this card in your pocket, you will be associated in some form or the other. For example, with the All, that's our loyalty program. Exactly the same way, air miles today and hotel points today are almost amalgamated in every sense possible. So it's a kind of a ecosystem that we all are working in. And we have to understand that each one of these things is related to each other. Because ultimately, we make a beautiful building, but if a bed is empty that night, it is a perishable product. If a chair is empty, it's again a perishable product. We are in that industry where we have to look at strategic, optical, and committed partnership in a 360 form.
I think one of the examples is also this the Tata New that has happened. What he's taking from what he said, like a lot of brands are associated with credit cards. I know the Taj is also associated with credit cards. Yeah, with Ananya Pandey, I believe that. And maybe like example from there is Tata New, and I could buy a refrigerator from Chroma, earn the points there, and probably burn it in the Taj.
That's the reason why we were the one of the anchor brands for Tata Company to start up as one of the big players of Indian hotel company. And today we do reap a lot of benefit from it. As a human psyche, everybody wants to celebrate. And it's the best place to celebrate with
in a very different way to what we are all trying to do at this point in time.
Anybody else would like to?
I think at the best Western hotels, we are integrating the technology and the AI, working with international firms to integrate the guest experience, starting from the booking to the checkouts and integrating the loyalty program as well. So I think, as Samir rightly said, that integration and is going to change the whole perspective in the next couple of years, where we will rely on more on the AI as far as the customer data acquisition, customer acquisition, and their loyalty integration is concerned. But again, I would reiterate that point that when it comes to the guest experience and all that, that I think all as hoteliers we wanted to keep it to ourselves.
I can just add, if you want, with a little bit of cynicism, the challenge will be for the large hotel operators because they are so boxed and firewalled, they'll find it very hard to change.
Is that correct?
No, he's trying to open the door, which we have to realize that it's wide open anyway. It's always been in that manner. Change is always a constant, and we're very happy that a hotel company of more than 122 years, it's like the elephant which started to run, and it runs very fast then.
Hospitality is all about detail, ultimately. Not everything's about scaling up. Sometimes you also need to scale down to understand what works on ground at that space. And I think even as large operators, thank you for mentioning that, we understand that today. That ultimately, and I'll take a very simple example of a PMS. The same PMS for an 80 room to a 600 room hotel, I'm sorry, won't work in the future because you're not able to take things down to your stakeholders in terms of profit because we don't understand the fact that this can be done by not something so big, but something so small as well. And that's the future. So efficiencies have to be bought in, localization has to be looked at, and ultimately, like all of us have already mentioned, it's one experience at a time which has to go right. Give more to the guest, try and control more from behind.
Also, I think, Mr. Jain, you touched upon the fact that experience and it's beyond algorithm. When you talk about some real-time human touches that's beyond the artificial intelligence, that will always sustain, whether you're in the palace hotel or slow tourism as we talk about. It's to do with being yourself in the nature, to the legacy, to the experiences which cannot be just as a distribution.
Okay, another one. I know Chalet works with the Taj and Marriott. But in this panel over here, would anybody partner with anybody after this? Would anybody partner with anybody else after this?
Partner with that.
I know that's why I kept that difficult one to answer. Thank you very much. I think we all understand. Just taking a few from where we are, the fastest growth is not about capital. I think it's about 3 C's. It's about clarity, courage, and compatibility. And that's what makes it work. And I think that's the kind of a broad consensus I think we can actually arrive at from this panel. It's also about what we keep building. It's let's build it with the right people, in the right manner, with the right speed, and for the right reasons. So I think that's something that we all can possibly, the audience can also take away from today's session. And with that, I would actually open it up to 1 or 2 questions in the audience. And our panel out here would be happy to answer that. Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience?
We can say thank you to Kamal because that's the partnership of everybody together here.
No, absolutely. Please give her and her team a big hand for putting this together. And we're going to have a very insightful, lovely evening ahead. Thanks, Kamal, once again. And thank you all. Thank you, panelists and